فصل في الحث على طلب العلم والعمل والتعليم واطلب علوم الدين وارقى إلى اليقين فالعلم قوت القلب فيه رضاء الرب.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين. أما بعد، من التعلم والتعليم والتذكر والتذكير والنفع والانتفاع والإفادة والاستفادة والحث على التمسك بكتاب الله وبسنة رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم والدعاء إلى الهدى والدلالة على الخير ابتغاء وجه الله ومرضاته وقربه وثوابه سبحانه مع اللطف والعافية برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم إنا نسألك العلم اللدني والمشرب الصافي الهني يا وهاب يا غني. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم. أما بعد. So Bismillah, so far we spoke about the first two integrals of prayer, which were the intention and saying Takbirat al-Ihram to enter the state of prayer. So now the third integral of prayer is standing. So what this lesson will mainly revolve around is the stance in which a person takes in prayer, which is mainly standing for one who is capable. And it becomes integral for praying the fardh prayers for a person who is capable of standing. So, قال الشيخ رحمه الله الثالث القيام في الفرض lil-Qadir. He said the third integral of prayer is standing in obligatory prayer for one who is capable. This goes back to the hadith that's narrated in Sahih Bukhari, in which one of the Sahaba who told the Prophet ﷺ that he was suffering from a disorder that made it difficult for him to pray while he was standing. So the Prophet ﷺ told him, صلي قائما فإن لم تستطع فقاعدا فإن لم تستطع فعلى جنب. So the Prophet ﷺ instructed this companion to pray standing up, and if he can't, then to pray sitting down, and if he can't, then to pray while laying on his side. And when it's said for obligatory prayers, it involves prayers that are also called al-mandur wa fardh kifaya, and also repeated prayers, because that's also sunnah in the Shafi'i madhab to repeat your prayers. And when it says for the person who is capable, this also involves someone who is capable to stand but with someone's assistance. Even if you have to hire someone with compensation to help you stand up in prayer, if you're capable of doing that, of hiring that person, then you're also considered capable of standing up for prayer. Also, if you need of a use of something like a cane or a stick to stand up in prayer, that is also considered capable, qadir, of standing up. So for those types of people, for them standing up in prayer becomes obligatory for their obligatory prayers. It's an integral. Second, he said, ويشترط نصب فقار ظهره فإن لم يقدر وقف منحنيا. Meaning, and it is a condition to straighten his spine. However, if he is not capable, then he has to stand while slightly bent. So some of the conditions that come with praying standing up is that a person must be standing up straight on their feet and to stand while the back is straight. However, standing up with a straightened back does not involve the neck. So if the neck is slightly bent forward, it's fine. Because in the Shafi'i madhab, when someone is praying, what must happen is that they should be facing the Qibla with their chest, having the face facing the Qibla is Sunnah, but it should not be avoided. So the most important thing is to have your back straight, both feet on the ground, and your chest facing the Qibla. Also, it is okay to stand while leaning on something slightly while facing the Qibla if you need to. However, if you're praying while leaning on something like a wall or a pillar, such that if it was removed from you, you would fall, then that is not allowed, because that will not be considered standing, that's more leaning. But if you're using it slightly for support, that is allowed. Also, standing on one leg is not allowed, because that is not considered proper standing. And also, for some people who might have a condition that they are unable to stand straight at all, that is okay. If someone who naturally has their backs hunched, then that is okay. They are still considered standing. However, if someone is on purpose standing so slightly bent without necessity that it looks like they're almost in the position of bowing, then that is not allowed. That's considered too low, unless they have a valid reason for why they're standing the way that they are. Also, if someone is naturally has a crooked back, or their back is hunched, for that person, when they prostrate, they should try to lower themselves more than the position that they are bent. For example, if someone's back is naturally bent at a 10-degree angle or a 45-degree angle, if that's how they naturally are, and when they get in the position of bowing, they should lower themselves a bit further than that to distinguish themselves from the position of standing and the position of bowing. And one of the reasons for this is because in fiqh there's a maxim, or what we call qawa'id. Basically, these are maxims that are applicable in almost all matters of revolving worship, and also of transactions in fiqh in general. And this maxim in Arabic, they say al-maysur la yasqut bil-ma'sur, which means what is feasible without difficulties, something that can easily be done without difficulty, is not abandoned by what is strained with difficulty. The example here is someone whose back is slightly hunched. That makes it difficult for them to stand up, which is understandable. But that does not mean that they abandon standing up completely. So they still have to do their best to stand up, and they still need to lower themselves a bit when they prostrate. Third, the author said, فإن لم يقدر قعد وركع محاذيا جبهته قدام ركبتيه. Meaning, if he is not capable, then he may sit and perform the bowing by making his forehead parallel to his knees. So, if someone is not able to stand up due to great difficulty, maybe from pain or from a disorder or some reason that's making standing up is so difficult, that's become a strain. Some of the example they give is if someone is suffering from a vertigo, such that it gives them nausea and their head spins if they stand up, then this person may pray sitting down without losing the reward of praying standing up. Now, praying sitting down can happen in many different positions, and they're all equally valid, but some are better than others. So ideally, if you're going to pray sitting down, you should either take the position of what they call iftirash, which is the position you sit in between the two prostrations. And there's also tarbiyah, which is when you sit cross-legged on the floor. You can pray in both of those positions, and they're both valid. So, if someone is going to pray while sitting down, they should at least try to straighten their back while they're sitting down. And when they're about to bow, they should move their forehead slightly forward to the point that their forehead is parallel to their knees. That's the position that they should take for bowing. And even better than that, if they can move their forehead to the point parallel to where their sujood will be, that would even be better. So, just to clarify, when you pray sitting down and you want to read your Fatiha, you straighten your back. When you're about to get into the bowing position, you make your forehead parallel to your knees. That's the minimum. And what's even better is to move it forward enough so that it's parallel to where your sujood will be, your prostration. One of the questions that the fuqaha have tried to clarify, which is, what is considered a great difficulty that prevents a person from praying standing up? Because this can differ from a person to a person. So one of the questions that was put forth is, does having a difficulty that keeps you away from concentrating in your prayer, having khushu' in prayer, is that considered a great difficulty that someone can abandon standing up in prayer for? Meaning, if someone has a lot of pain or an issue that's keeping them away from having khushu' in prayer, is that considered a great difficulty? And Imam Al-Rabbi said yes. Meaning, if someone is having so much pain praying standing up that it's causing them to not have khushu', then this person may sit down. However, Ibn Hajar said no. Great pain that makes you not have khushu' does not excuse you from standing up. You should still stand up. Then, the next point, the author said, وَالْأَفْضَلْ أَنْ يُحَاذِي مَوْضِعَ سُجُودِهِ. Meaning, the most preferred is to align his forehead with the place of prostration. This is, like we clarified, for someone who is praying while sitting down and they want to do and they want to do the bowing. It is better for them to have their forehead parallel to where they will normally do their sujood, their prostration. So again, to clarify, if you pray sitting down, you have your back straight. When you do your bowing, the minimum is to have your forehead parallel to your knees. And what's even better is to have it so far forward that it's parallel to where your sujood will be. Then, so if someone is not able to pray standing up, and they're also not able to pray sitting down in any of those positions that we mentioned, then the author says, فَإِنْ لَمْ يَقْدَرْ اضْطَجَعَ عَلَى جَنْبِهِ وَالْأَيْمَنْ أَفْضَلُ. And if one is unable to sit, then he is required to lay down on his side, and the right side is more preferred. So the hadith that we mentioned in the beginning about the Prophet ﷺ, he instructed the companion that if he's unable to pray sitting down, then he should lay down on his side. And this is exclusively for a person who's not able to. And again, like we mentioned in the beginning, what's obligatory is that throughout the whole prayer, your chest faces the Qibla, not your face. So when you're in the sitting position or in the laying down position, in both positions, your chest should always face the Qibla. And your face facing the Qibla is Sunnah. So it's best to do both. So, the fuqaha have said that the best of two sides to lay upon is on your right side. So whenever you pray laying down, you must pray laying down on your right side. Unless, if you have a valid reason to pray on your left side, then you're not allowed. So in general, praying on your left side while laying down is makruh, unless you have a valid reason, such that maybe you have great difficulty or great pain on your right side. Then you can pray laying down on your left side and your prayer is valid. And someone who prays laying down, on their side, they're still recommended to get in the sitting position when they do their bowing and their prostration. But instead of standing up, they can lay on their side. So when they're reading the Fatiha, the small surah, and they're doing their qunut, all these things, they can do it while laying down on the right side. But when they're doing the bowing or prostration, if they can get in that position properly while sitting down on the floor, then they should do that. Next point, the author said, فإن لم يقدر استلقى ويرفع رأسه بشيء ويؤمئ برأسه للركوع والسجود وإيماؤه للسجود أكثر قدر إمكانه. Meaning, if one is unable to lay on his side, so this is someone who wasn't able to stand up or sit down on the floor or lay on the right side. If all those options cannot happen, then it says if one is unable to lay on his side, then he should lay down on his back and lift his head slightly with something to ensure that his face is facing the Qibla. Then he is to gesture with his head towards the Qibla for his bowing and prostration. And the gesture for prostration should be as far as he is able to. So the option after that, if even laying down on your right side is too difficult, then what the person does is they lay on their back straight on the floor, and they put something beneath their head, such as a pillow or anything that can lift their head, such that their face is towards the Qibla. So at this point, if you're laying on your back, you don't really have the option to have your chest facing the Qibla. So now it becomes obligatory upon you to have your face towards the Qibla. And that happens with putting something slightly small beneath your head, such that it accomplishes that. So, and then let's assume that someone is laying down on their back and they have nothing to lift their head, or it's causing them difficulty to lift their head to face the Qibla. Then at that point, this person is excused, and they don't have to raise their head. Instead, they can face the Qibla with the soles of their feet. So now the soles of their feet must be faced towards the Qibla, and that becomes obligatory. So just to recap slightly, what's obligatory is to have your chest facing the Qibla. And that is when you're standing, sitting, and laying on your right side. But if none of those are possible, and you lay on your back and you pray while laying on your back, then you should put something beneath your head to lift your face slightly to face the Qibla. Now it's your face that must face the Qibla. If that's not possible, then it's your feet that must face the Qibla. Because at every position of prayer, one specific part of your body must be facing the Qibla no matter what. And if that part of your body is moved to the left or right, or it goes outside of the position of the Qibla, then the prayer becomes invalid. Then, if someone is praying while laying down on their back, when it comes to prostration, when it comes to bowing and prostration, if they are able to get up and do those actions, then they should. But if they cannot, then what they do is, for bowing and prostration, they slightly move their head. They gesture with their head. So if someone's laying down straight, laying on their back on the floor, when they do prostration, they lift their head a bit further. And to distinguish it from for bowing, they move it up further. And for prostration, they move it down even further, to distinguish the action of bowing and prostration. And they should do what they can to distinguish the bowing and prostration by how far they move their head. And what the fuqaha said, this should happen qadra imkano. This is as far as he's able to. Meaning, as long as that distinguishing happens between the bowing and the prostration, then this person has done what suffices. Next, the author says, فَإِن لَمْ يَقْدِرْ أَوْمَأْ بِطَرْفِهِ. Now, if a person is not able to even lift their head for their prayer, then they do the actions of, it says, if he's unable to gesture with his head, then he makes a gesture by blinking his eyes. So the actions of prayer, the bowing, the prostration, the standing, all that will be done by a person's eyes. Meaning, by blinking, he tries to imitate those actions with his eyes, and that's how his prayer will be. And it will be completely correct and valid if he is in no other position to do except for that. Lastly, if he is unable to gesture with his eyes, then he performs the integrals of the prayers in his heart. Now, we're talking about an example we have is people who are completely paralyzed. For example, if someone is completely paralyzed and is unable to do any of these actions at all, not even blink their eyes, but they still have their senses, and they're even unable to lift their head, then a person is in that position will have to do the actions of prayers in their heart, because all those other positions will be burdensome. Now, and this person would also still have to face the qibla with the soles of their feet. So when this person enters their prayer, they do their takbirat al-ihram and their intention with their heart. They recite the Quran with their heart, and they kind of imagine themselves doing all the actions of the prayer within their heart, and that suffices. However, if while a person is praying in a certain position, he feels that he's feeling better. For example, if someone's praying while laying down on their side, and in the middle of prayer they felt that their health is improving, or they felt that they are able to pray while sitting down, then in the middle of prayer they should move to this higher position. So if someone is laying on their back and they feel better, then they should move to the position of laying on one side. And if they were praying laying down on their side and they feel better, then they should sit instead. And the person who's sitting down, if they feel that they have the energy to stand up, then in the middle of prayer it becomes obligatory on them to stand up, because at this point they have no excuse. So the same way you're allowed to move to a higher position in prayer if you feel better, also if in the middle of prayer you experience great difficulty, you're allowed to move to a lower position. So if you're standing and you start not feeling well, you can sit down and continue your prayer. So this works both ways. And then the author said, وَيَتَنَفَّلْ الْقَادِرُ قَاعِدًا وَمُضْطَجِعًا لَا مُسْتَلْقِيًا وَيَقْعُدُ لِلرُّكُوعِ وَالسُّجُودِ. Meaning, and the one who is capable of standing can perform the recommended prayers sitting down or lying down on their side, but is not allowed to lie down on their backs and has to sit during bowing and prostration. So a person who is completely able to pray while standing without any issues is allowed to pray the recommended sunnah prayers while sitting down. And this is by the consensus of scholars. So someone who's completely healthy and has no issues, if they want to pray their sunnah prayers while sitting down, it's absolutely allowed, and they have the right to do so. And some of the scholars mentioned that one of the reasons for this is because there are a lot of sunnah prayers. There are a lot of recommended prayers that happen throughout the day. And some people will not be able to do all of them. Maybe someone who's not feeling well or the elderly. So for those types of people, they can pray their sunnah prayers while they're sitting down with no issues. And for those people, they are allowed to pray sitting down, and they're also allowed to pray laying on their side. But they're not allowed to pray it while they're lying down on their back. So just to clarify, a person who is healthy and capable of standing up, they can pray their sunnah prayers while sitting down or laying down on the right side. Even if there's no difficulty, they're allowed to do that. Because there's no evidence in the sunnah that showed that anyone has ever prayed laying down on their back while they were still healthy and capable of standing up. And a person who is healthy, who decides to pray laying down on their side, they still have to get up for their ruku' and sujood. They have to get up for their bowing and their prostration, because they're not excused from doing that, because they're capable of getting possession of those actions. And then, so when this person prays, basically they start their prayer laying down on their side. Then when it comes to the position, when it comes to time of ruku', they get up and get into the position of ruku'. Then they go back to lay down on their side. Then they get up to do the sujood and get back to laying down on the other side. And it's the same for sitting also. Next, the author said, وأجر القاعد نصف أجر القائم والمضطجع نصف أجر القاعد. Meaning, and the reward for praying the recommended prayers while sitting for the one who can stand is half compared to praying while standing. And the reward for praying while laying down on one side is half the reward for the one sitting down. This is again for the person that can sit. So just to clarify, if someone is completely capable of praying while standing up and they choose to pray their sunnah prayer sitting down, then they get half of the reward. And if they decide to pray laying down on their side, they even get half of that, so a quarter of the reward. So every time a person chooses a lower position to pray in, they lose half of the reward of the prayer for choosing that position if they're capable of praying in the higher position. However, a person who's actually physically cannot pray standing up and pray sitting down, that person does not lose any reward, because they're excused and they're not doing it on purpose. It's not by their choice. They're unable to stand up. So for that kind of person, they can pray completely sitting down with the full reward, and their salah, inshallah, will be accepted. So in summary, we'll just try to summarize the whole lesson, inshallah, quickly. So, a person who is about to enter their fardh obligatory prayers, it's mandatory upon them to pray standing up, with their spine straight, both feet on the ground. And if they cannot stand straight, it's okay for them to stand slightly bent. And this does not apply to the neck. So if the neck is slightly bent forward, it's fine. Then if they're unable to pray standing up, then they should pray sitting down. The best is the position of iftirash, and some said which is the position of the sitting between the two sujood. And some have said it's best to pray in the position of tarbiyah, which is sitting cross-legged. And then if a person cannot pray sitting down, then they should pray laying down on the right side. Unless they have an excuse, they can pray on the left side, but mainly on the right side. If they're unable, then they should pray on their back and lift the head slightly, have the face facing the qibla, and do the ruku' and the sujood by moving their head slightly further further up. And if they're unable, then they should do the actions of the prayers with their eyelids. And if they cannot, then they should do it by running the actions on their heart. And because the obligatory prayers are obligatory and no one is allowed to leave them for any reason, that's why no matter what position a person is in, or no matter what their health is, they must do the 5 daily prayers in the manner that's most possible for them. And one thing we'll finish with is some of the mashayikh have mentioned that for some people, because when they're in a state of prayer, they tend to be neglectful sometimes, and their heads wander off. They said that when you're standing in prayer, you should have a certain state in your heart. So they said when standing in prayer, your heart should be in a certain state. You should stand in a state of humility and weakness, knowing who you are standing in front of. Because most people, unfortunately, when they pray, their heads wander off left and right, or their thoughts. So it's very important to know that when you're praying, you're standing in front of the presence of Allah. So when you're standing in that position, you should be in a state of awe and veneration of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who created the heavens and the earth. And you should feel blessed that Allah allowed you to be in this position, to be in His presence at least 5 times a day. Also, when you recite the Takbirat al-Ihram, when you say Allahu Akbar, you should have certainty in your heart what those words mean. So when you say Allahu Akbar, you are testifying there is nothing greater in this world than Allah, the most majestic. So when you raise your hand, what some of the Mashaykh told us, when you say Allahu Akbar, it's almost as if you're throwing the whole world behind your back. And the only thing that you're considering to be worthy of your attention is Allah. So that's one of the meanings they say of Allahu Akbar at the beginning of a prayer. And also try to have nothing in your heart at that point of the ephemeral world. So any thoughts and worries and concerns that a person has at that point, they're minimal in front of who you're standing in front of. So all these things are things of the dunya. So try to clear your heart from all those things before you enter your prayer. At least by the time you say Allahu Akbar, at least consider who you're standing in front of and who you're praying to. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. الحمد لله.